Tonight, she was a highly regarded senior member of the CWA, the Country Women's Association. He was a married family man, grandfather radio club enthusiast. No one knew that Carol Clay and Russell Hill, both in their 70s, were lovers whose affair spanned 60 years. No one, it was thought, knew about their secret camping trips to Victoria's wild and beautiful high country until they vanished. Last March, the couple's romantic campsite by a river at Wonnangatta in the Alpine National Park was found abandoned and burnt out. And despite intense searching by police, Russell and Carol have not been found.
These people have just vanished. Where are they?
So, were they murdered? Did they get lost in the rugged and hostile bush? Or have they run away? Tonight, our experts investigate this mystery of the high country.
None of that seems to make sense.
The campfire hiding secrets.
How did those gas bottles get into the fire?
The missing drone.
Everything that takes an image is gone.
The marauding wild dogs.
I was sure that we were going to find bodies.
And at the heart of it all, the affair.
They thought that they were being discreet, but it was obvious they were a couple.
Good evening, I'm Liz Hayes, and this is Under Investigation. Joining me...
The reality is putting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Greg Kelly is a former New South Wales police detective and one of Australia's most experienced and respected fire forensic examiners.
Someone set fire to it and then tipped all the pieces out so they put it back together.
Lachlan Cullican,
It's haunting.
a contract musterer who has lived in Victoria's high country his whole life and on horseback took part in the search for Carol and Russell.
I'm there talking to the last person that probably seen people that will never be seen again. It doesn't look natural, that's for sure.
Valentine Smith is a retired Victorian Police Senior Sergeant who ran Crime Stoppers for 15 years.
I really want to know what's happened here.
Valentine now investigates cold cases and, in particular, missing persons cases.
Now, if we're dealing with a psychopath, very rare, but it does happen.
This is more than an affair, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big love story.
And Rachel Walden is a New South Wales psychologist who brings her expertise in relationships to the table.
It sounds like love. It sounds like in love.
Carol and Russell were childhood sweethearts who carried their secret love into their 70s. But in some respects, they were also an odd couple, especially in the remote Victorian high country, where Russell had spent many years working as a logger. His best mate, Rob Ashland, is president of the East Gippsland Amateur Radio Club, of which Russell was an enthusiastic member.
Russell was, I would say, a caring sort of a fella. Very careful with how he went about doing things.
Yes, he had a deep understanding of the bushland that he ultimately went missing in.
Oh, yes. I don't think any one of us knew or do know the country and the landscape and the behavioural weather patterns up there any better than Russell.
But Carol, the hard-working, very glamorous, even prim CWA leader, was cut from very different cloth.
She was a lady. She was always dressed up, funny, pretty, still pretty in her 70s, energetic, kind, knowledgeable.
This was a long-time love affair, we're told, some 50, 60 years, but even though they were very discreet, Russell Hill and Carol Clay did come into contact with others when camping, including Rob Ashland.
Russell just introduced Carol as a friend, and when he said just as a friend, I thought to myself, oh yeah, I've been around for more than 5 minutes, looks more than a friend to me.
What made you think that?
You could see the closeness between the two of them.
So, what was your impression of Carol?
A very dressed up sort of a lady for in the bush.
Did she have a lipstick on?
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
This was a woman that you felt slightly out of place for the bush.
I must say I'd have to agree with that.
So even though they went to great lengths to be discreet, they didn't hide when they came into contact with others? Or does that tell us anything?
Well, I think what it is that when we have that sensation of being in love, which we often think is an emotion, it's more of a chemical reaction, and it's a chemical process in our brain that's similar to addiction. So our judgment's a bit off. And so maybe they thought that they were being discreet, but as Rob's just said, it was obvious they were a couple.
Well, as Rob said, he'd been around more than 5 minutes.
Yes, he had been around more than 5 minutes. So perhaps to some people it was quite clear that this was a couple.
Actually, it's one of the lures of the country up there, isn't it? You can be whatever you want to be.
Oh, that's what they tell me.
I think what I'm trying to suggest is that, no one's there to judge, no one's there to even see you necessarily.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
While the couple's love affair was not common knowledge, according to Rob Ashland, Russell's wife Robin was aware of the relationship. Robin knew this before they went missing.
Oh, yeah. Robin told me straight it had been going on for 20 years. And she let me know that in their teenage years, Russell and Carol were teenage sweethearts.
And how was she about that information? Was she upset about that?
I was a little bit surprised that she wasn't more upset about it. I'm afraid if somebody was sniffing around my loved one, I'd be wanting to know, why don't you go and find somebody of your own?
She wasn't surprised then that Russell was camping with Carol when he went missing?
No, she wasn't surprised. It was, no. She didn't actually know she was up there with him, but I don't think she was really surprised.
This is more than an affair, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big love story, isn't it? It's a long time.
I think your research shows that it's not unusual for those over 55 to have affairs.
There's a lot of research into the ageing population and sexuality, and what we're finding is that people are actually having a lot of affairs in retirement homes, in their neighbourhoods.
And we know that this was a strong relationship because Russell did have a logging business and he drove a truck. And Carol apparently would meet him in various places and go on the truck trip.
Yeah, which seems kind of extraordinary for somebody who's so neatly attired, a rule-following woman, to do something that seems so, it's kind of romantic, but also, I don't know how many people you would tell that I meet my boyfriend and, we're getting the truck together.
Well, it's love, isn't it?
It sounds like love. It sounds like in love.
Carol was divorced, but Russell was still married, and both, it's understood, were financially secure. After a lifetime of secret love, one theory is that it's possible Carol and Russell disappeared to begin a new life together. Was he wealthy?
Yes, he was.
He was comfortable and he wasn't worried about his financial future.
Oh, no. Russell was going to line up to a T-bone steak next week, not a piece of bread with a bit of dripping on it.
Russell was reasonably wealthy. We have to raise that, and the reason I raise that is whether or not they could have run off together. They had the means.
Yeah, I'd have trouble with that. Why would you? Where would you go? They're not 20-year-olds, not 25-year-olds that can disappear into the sunset and turn up in the Bahamas. It's a different world. We've got the world where you need passports, you need all sorts of different types of identity, cash flow, accessing accounts. It just doesn't fit.
A couple in their 70s who've been living with this arrangement for some time now, how likely is it they've gone, let's get out of here?
Not likely. It just doesn't seem likely. Carol's such a rule follower, has been, except for this affair really, she's been a rule follower all of her life from what we can see.
Apart from her love for Russell and her family, the CWA was everything to Carol. The venerable Country Women's Association counted her amongst its superstars. She was elected as a CWA Member of Honour with an overwhelming vote. Her commitment to the organisation, as well as her elegance and glamour, were legendary.
She was a lady. She was always dressed up. You couldn't really imagine her in a pair of dracky-dacks and runners. They just weren't her type of clothes, but you really wouldn't wear high fashion out in the bush, would you? Hair done, face doodahed up, and always had her lippy on. Always had the lippy in the pocket, as I understand.
Margaret Cassemeyer is a former member of the Victorian CWA. Here was a woman who gave her all to the CWA, loved being a part of it, revelled in it, it seems, and had a shining reputation.
She was 110%er in everything. She just gave everything. Everyone thought the world of her.
But it seems the CWA, the organisation Carol devoted her life to, has taken a curious attitude to their missing superstar. Her name, as one of only 6 CWA members of honour, has been taken off the CWA's monthly newsletter. Do you think the CWAs are worried about reputational damage?
You have an affair, you know, it's not okay in our society. We're not those kind of people at the CWA. We hold ourselves to a higher standard or something like that.
Obviously, there was some discomfort about this relationship. And even at the Amateur Radio Club, Rob Ashland had some thoughts about this as well. Were members of the radio club a little upset about what Russell was doing then?
Oh, they were. The boys were a bit upset in regard to it. I did discuss it with a couple of other radio friends that are in the group because I felt they deserved to know, simply for the reason that we needed our wives to know that we weren't doing what Russell was doing in the way of taking a girlfriend away on camping trips. As president of the group, I thought it was my duty to make sure that was known, so as that we could keep the name of the radio club clean.
So it's a tough world out there, don't you think, Valentine? But it is. So these are the truths of these situations, and they do impact investigations because people feel uncomfortable.
Look, I understand all of that, and sometimes that can actually work against you in an investigation where someone is less likely to tell you something that might impact on their integrity or the integrity of the group that they belong to.
But when you're investigating a mystery, I guess it can close doors.
Well, it can.
Lines of conversation can
absolutely
be
hit dead
inhibited.
ends. Yeah, you do. And then you've got to keep finding the one that's open. And sometimes it's not the front door, it's the back door.
Coming up.
This is the clearing they were in?
It's certainly isolated.
If things go bad, not many people can find out about it.
It just started rolling in at the burnout campsite and knew straight away that something really unforgiving had happened.
That's next on Under Investigation.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
For almost a year now, a couple in their 70s has been missing since setting up camp in an isolated location in Victoria's high country. The clues are few and their disappearance baffling. Do you think they could have run off?
I hope they ran off.
The only thing police know for sure is that 74-year-old experienced bushman Russell Hill and 73-year-old Carol Clay, a glamorous and hard-working member of the Country Women's Association, were secret lovers. What do you know about them, Valentine?
Well, Russell's 74 years of age, spent a lot of time in the bush, a lot of time with big boy toys, trucks and chainsaws and all that sort of thing. And he's a ham radio enthusiast as well, so...
He's in his domain.
Exactly, and that's what makes this so intriguing, because it's just unusual that he wouldn't be found close to that campsite.
Thursday, March 19th last year, Russell leaves his home in his Land Cruiser and collects Carol from her home only a half-hour drive away. Mobile phone data shows the route they took towards the high country. It's the most remote corner of Victoria, nearly 400 kilometres from Melbourne, in the heart of the Alps. The next day, Friday, the couple head into Wanangata Valley along a 23-kilometre logging track called the Zika Spur Track. It's rough and slow going. Four-wheel drive vehicles usually can't travel much more than 10 kilometres per hour.
I mean, he's got all the maps and he's got radio contact. He knew that country, no problems at all.
So he had no doubts about what he was going to get himself into?
No, none at all. He'd been there before. He'd been there on at least 2 occasions we have documented, and obviously more than that. We worked there. He'd worked on forming the Zika Spur Track, I think, didn't he, Lachlan?
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that track. That's a pretty rough old track,
Yeah, it
isn't
drops you straight down the bottom. There's not much room for error nor to turn around or stop, so...
It's known that Russell has with him his drone, which he calls Fred, and loves flying. Our experts will later consider the drone as key evidence. Russell and Carol arrive at a location he enjoys and near to where he had been to on his own just the week before.
As far as camping destinations go, it's probably one of the most rugged, I'd say. There was a stage where it was named the most isolated cattle property in the Southern Hemisphere.
It's certainly isolated. What I'm suggesting is no one's going to find them.
Yes, right.
Would that be part of the thinking?
Yeah, it's an affair. They're trying to keep it quiet.
That's right. And we've got a photograph here, which is an excellent photograph. You know this well, Lachlan.
Yes, sir.
And this is the clearing they were in, somewhere in, is that correct?
Yeah, just right on the dry river.
Yeah. So here's the Wanangata River in the background.
Yep.
And then we have the main
That's the
Wanangata
main
track
road,
going through here.
But from that track, you can't see that campsite.
Yeah, what a perfect spot.
Yeah.
At 6 p.m, Russell, who is also an avid member of the East Gippsland Amateur Radio Club, joins their regular evening call.
This is VK 3 Echo.
On the radio is also his close mate, Rob Ashland. The radio club members talk for about half an hour. Then Russell stays on the line, telling Rob his plans for the next day's trip. It's the last time Rob will hear from Russell.
Russell was his normal self. When he was in the bush, he was happy.
No hint of any issue?
No, nothing at all.
No mention of others?
No, there was no mention that Carol was with him or anyone else there near the campsite.
Russell and Rob ended their radio call at around 6:40 p.m. And that's when this mystery begins. Whatever happened to Russell and Carol occurred either during the night or the following morning, Saturday. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, a passerby comes across Russell and Carol's campsite. It has been completely destroyed by fire. The passerby takes this photo, but it will be over a week before it's handed to police.
Well, 6:40 p.m. was the cut-off time for the conversation with Rob Ashland, and there's some suggestion that the drone may have been flying that night, but it was sunset at 7:24 p.m. So there's a pretty short window of opportunity to cook, fly the drone, and do all those sort of things before black.
Hearing nothing over the next few days, Rob Ashland is worried by Russell's radio silence. He passes on his concerns to Russell's wife, Robin, who reports her husband missing when he fails to come home. But 5 days have already passed. The photo of the burnt-out campsite is finally given to police.
A married man and his female companion gone without a trace.
But by the time they muster a team to the remote high country, 8 days have passed since Russell's last radio call.
We really don't know what has caused Russell and Carol's disappearance.
A lot of clues gone by then, I would think, Valentine.
That's one of the biggest problems with these type of cases is that gap. So 8 days, we're talking 8 days. A lot can happen to contaminate that scene, both natural and through other, human interference during that time.
Local musterer Lachlan Cullican was called in to help police search for the couple. What he saw convinced him an intruder had most likely come into the campsite.
So when you came up, what did you see?
So for one, the car was locked and both of their wallets in the footwell of the car, Russell and Carol's wallet, all the cards thrown out of it. And when I say cards, I mean like membership cards and that sort of thing. No debit, credit cards or cash in either of them. So someone had come past and taken advantage of an empty campsite or what, but it seems strange to lock the door on your way out. Obviously the cruiser was facing broadside as you drive in, so you just see the blackened canopy on the car and then just the burnt campsite and deck chairs and tents and it just doesn't look natural. And by the end of it, when we were riding around, I was sure that we were going to find bodies, not missing people.
While scouring bushland, Lachlan encountered a worker spraying blackberries who claimed to have seen Carol and Russell driving by and that a drone had been flying.
He told you he had seen Russell and Carol on the Friday night. And of course, we know they were no longer there by lunchtime Saturday.
So to my knowledge, he's the last person that actually saw him. He went on to tell me that they flew, or Russell flew his drone over his camp that night, which he thought was a bit disrespectful.
Do you recall if he said it was Russell's drone? The question comes to mind, why would he know it was Russell's drone rather than anybody else's drone?
I'm not sure. He was just adamant that that was his drone, that he flew it over his camp on Friday night.
I think one of the biggest things that I focus in on is certainly what's the intent? What was on their mind at the time of their reported missing?
Christopher Young, one of America's most renowned missing persons experts, particularly those lost in the wilderness, says it's conceivable Russell or Carol might have been injured while camping, and possibly in rough bushland if Russell's drone had been lost and they'd gone looking for it.
Say one of them gets hurt. So if she gets hurt, I'm guessing that he would try to, give her first aid, whatever needs to be done, make her comfortable. He may seek additional help or try to carry her or something like that. Now, if it's the other way around, where he's injured and he's immobile, she may panic, especially if he's unresponsive, if he's knocked out or something. Then she may not have any idea what to do. She may panic, she may start running, and then she may hurt herself, trip over something, then she gets hurt, and then nobody's going for help.
This relationship is actually important to the investigation, isn't it, Valentine?
Exactly. If something unexpected happened in this environment to these two people at that time, how do you think they would react? There's no mobile phone reception in there.
Absolutely not. I just think, given its location and isolation, that if things go bad, not many people know about it or can find out about it.
I mean, what do they do when something goes wrong? What is available out there, Lachlan?
Not much. There's a couple of toilets, there's the remains of the homestead, then there's a horse camp up one end, and that's it. There's a couple of hours away from phone service, and not much help if you need it.
If you get into trouble, what do you do?
Well, I just try not to get into trouble. But...
Very good answer.
Rob Ashland believes Russell would never walk into dense bushland. And if he was injured, he's sure Carol would have tried to call for help over the radio. Instead, Rob believes it's clear his friend faced trouble because of what he saw in the pictures of the fire.
When pictures started rolling in of the burnt-out campsite, I could see characteristics, in my opinion, that weren't Russell. If you look at that tent where the fire was, it's like as if all the chairs and everything were thrown inside the tent and it was set alight. And that, I believe, was man-made.
In your opinion, Russell would never light an open fire anywhere near his tent and car. Is that correct?
That's correct. He had enough brains to have it far enough away from his car, and when I say far enough away, it'd only be a small fire and it'd be at least 20 metres or so away.
So this could not be a campfire that got out of control?
No, no.
That scene, as Rob suggested, looks like stuff's been tossed into the area where the tent was and set fire to.
The question now for former policeman, fire forensics expert Greg Kelly and missing persons investigator Valentine Smith is what vital clues lay in the ashes of the campfire.
Drums, tables, chairs. It's just a big rubbish heap.
It looks like it's been designed to fuel the flame.
Well, just get rid of stuff. I mean, it's totally different to the way Russell would set up the camp.
That then makes it a very suspicious fire.
Sure. Look, using fire to destroy physical evidence where something untoward's happened has been known in criminal investigation for as long as it existed.
Coming up,
the gas bottles are in the fire. How did those gas bottles get into the fire?
None of that seems to make sense. Why would they have done that themselves?
You did some testing in regards to this fire.
Yes, I did. It's a very hot, quick fire that developed through that.
An accelerant?
Could have, yeah.
That's next on Under Investigation. It's dense and potentially deadly country. But the sudden disappearance of experienced bushman Russell Hill and his secret lover Carol Clay in Victoria's high country remains a mystery. The answers, our experts believe, may lie in the ashes of the fire that destroyed the couple's campsite.
It seems to me that fire holds the key.
For someone who's an experienced bushman and looking at the debris, there's a drum in there, an empty drum. And from what we understand, and certainly at this time of the year, around March last year with the bushfires around Australia, anyone that had any experience in the bush, you'd be thinking they'd be very concerned. So I wouldn't expect Russell's the type of guy that's going to walk away and leave the fire burning. For that to then become an uncontrolled fire and burn the tent down and everything around it, I would find highly unusual. Why is all this stuff piled in the middle? None of that seems to make sense. And why would they have done that themselves?
And Rob Ashland, Russell's mate from the amateur radio club, agrees. He'd been deeply concerned ever since their final radio call. The club was a big part of Russell's life, and to Rob, Russell's radio silence was deeply suspicious.
The I3XL, 3VZP, you about there, Russell?
When you hadn't heard from Russell for 2 nights, did you try to call him?
Oh, yeah, well, we're all on the same frequency on the amateur band, and, just jokingly you'd say, come on, Russell, you about? You having a feed or something, but no, there was no response whatsoever.
You knew that wasn't what Russell would normally do?
It wasn't normal behaviour, Liz, no.
Rob and Russell had camped together many times on club weekends away, and Rob knew him to be extremely capable and cautious in the bush. So your heart sank ultimately when you saw pictures of that campsite?
Oh, yeah. I knew straight away in my own mind that, something really unforgiving had happened.
And the things you could see in that fire told you something was not right?
It was not right. That's most definitely true.
If we look at the photograph of the location of the fire to where the Land Cruiser is, I don't have fire developing into the tyres. I don't have the esky melted. So I don't have a lot of heat coming across to the vehicle. I don't have burn patterns in the doors. But to have this amount of intensity suggests that it's a very hot, quick fire that developed through that, used up all the fuels and then extinguished.
An accelerant?
Could have, yeah.
For our experts, all the evidence is pointing to an intruder at Carol and Russell's campsite. And for Rob Ashland, seeing gas bottles sitting inside what was Russell and Carol's tent is very telling.
The gas bottle wouldn't have been inside the tent. It just never ever happened. His gas bottle, if it wasn't in his truck, and it'd be just sitting underneath the truck outside.
Russell had a very clear plan of his campsite. He did things the same way every time.
Yep.
So those gas bottles were always in the same place?
Yep.
Look, if we go the plan of how Russell sets up his camp, and the gas stoves and things are at the rear of that vehicle. But in the first photo that we see, which was taken on the 21st of March at 2 p.m, the gas bottles are in the fire. How did those gas bottles get into the fire? Would those gas bottles, if they were on and burning, would they generate the sort of heat that you're talking about to create this sort of fire scenario? Is it possible?
Should there be an external fire that causes the gas bottle to start to heat up, the LPG inside will start to expand and the pressure release will give way, and you'll get like a flamethrower effect with the bottle sitting there with a flame coming out of it.
You did some testing in regards to this fire, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Fire forensics expert and former policeman Greg Kelly looked closely at all the elements of the fire and carried out his own tests to see what might have happened.
I've been able to go out and actually have a look at the tent, because one of the questions is, could an accidental fire have started and then slowly worked its way through the combustible materials that were on site? To have everything within this scene destroyed by fire, I wanted to know whether or not the tent could work as a wicking mechanism to help the fire to develop from one area to another. I conducted a number of test burns on the guy ropes, which nylon. I was using a gas torch on these, and as I lit this, the orange colour on the outside started to ignite, self-extinguished and just dropped away. So I couldn't keep it ignited. Similarly with the tent material, I've got a number of holes here. I tried different positions with a gas torch. I was able to look at the ribbing or the webbing here, and I lit that. I lit some of the tie downs around, as well as directly on the material. And each time I took the flame away, it would continue to burn for a very short period of time and then extinguish. Val mentioned to me before that was it possible that the LP gas bottles could be actually utilised, and certainly all you'd need to do is sit it in the middle of that fire, turn the gas cock on and have that as a fuel, and now you've got this conflagration developing of this intense fire fed by LPG. Whilst that pressure's coming out, it's just going to keep igniting and continuing to burn.
I've got secrets I can't tell.
If, as it appears, that the fire which destroyed Russell and Carol's camp was deliberately lit, then by whom and why? What might have been the motive for murder? Coming up.
The drone's missing, their phones are missing, everything that takes an image is gone.
What are you getting to here?
They were being stalked without knowing about it.
You won't even see a light, you just hear a gunshot.
It's an extraordinary cover-up.
And it does happen. It absolutely happens.
That's next on Under Investigation. There are few clues explaining the mysterious disappearance of Russell Hill and Carol Clay last year in Victoria's high country. Police have not found their bodies, nor revealed any motive for their possible murder. Forensics expert Greg Kelly believes the fire that consumed the couple's campsite was lit deliberately. And the contents from Russell and Carol's wallets, suspiciously scattered in their vehicle, points to an intruder or intruders. But what could have been the motive to attack this elderly couple in their remote campsite? Russell made what would be his last call to his mate Rob Ashland at the radio club on Friday night, March 20th. And 19 hours later, when a passerby found their campsite, there was no sign of the couple and nearly everything had been burned.
We know when the fire occurred, from 6:40 p.m. on the 20th till the 21st, 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the 21st. Now, the random camper that saw and photographed that fire said that the fire was cold. So how long would it take for a fire of this type to go cold?
It was a cold night, so that's going to help. to give you off the heat.
13 degrees overnight.
Yeah. This is a surface fire. If it burnt relatively quickly, it'd be hours later. But within those time frames, that's very opportunistic for someone to come along, he misses the last radio call, and by the next day, there's a fire there.
But you're saying some hours. So I'm leaning towards that the fire happened maybe late in the evening of the night before, on the 20th. And the other thing I'm really interested in is the drone's missing. Their phones are missing, so everything that takes an image is gone. And the other thing is these boots. We've got to focus on the boots, because elastic side work type boots, which a bushman would wear, they'd be pretty decent boots. And I've seen so many bushfires and things where you find those curled up soles, folded up soles, they're not there. So I'm picking that they were up and about the night before. It's something to do with the drone, maybe something to do with the fact that drones take images. Maybe something's happened here, there's been an altercation here, someone's pulled a phone out and started doing the stuff, and then something's happened. There's been some sort of confrontation or altercation with a third party, or something that's created some sort of conflict. I mean, he's a big guy, he's used to the bush. I don't think he'd take any rubbish from anyone.
He'd be the protector, wouldn't he?
Well, yeah, and he's been driving plant and trucks and things like that. He'd know how to sort of mix it with the boys. So if there's a couple of young bucks who jacked him up or caused some problems, I think he'd have them on as best as he could. And it's got out of hand, something like that. And sadly, they both suffered as a result.
To our experts, the missing drone is particularly mystifying. It adds weight to the theory that Russell saw something or someone involved in an illegal activity.
You're not thinking drugs, are you? As in that drone's picked up something that somebody doesn't like?
Look, I've done a reasonable amount of hiking in the bush to look for drug crops in my youth, as a young police officer.
Oh, for the thank goodness you said that. Yes.
And this area to me is so remote to put in a sort of a crop, say of 100 plants or a couple of 100 plants or whatever.
That's hard work.
It'd be pretty infertile to be trying to grow anything bigger than that. My experience is that drug crops would be closer to a major centre if they're going to be in a bush area, easily accessible. I'm saying no, not drug crops.
Right, OK.
So was the drone, saw you mimicking a trigger finger there before, so...
What does that mean, Lachlan?
Well, when you said that the drone might have picked up something, my first thought was a deer hunter.
Yeah.
Taking the head off a stag and then followed it back to camp. And then, like you said, it's got you on camera, and one thing led to another.
So he's going to stand there, argue with them about handing it over, whatever, however that could potentially unfold, based on just the drones picked up something.
High Country musterer Lachlan Cullican believes there may have been hunters operating illegally in the area where Russell and Carol were camped. While searching for the couple, he found large numbers of dead deer.
Lachlan, you were saying about the deer, that fascinates me. You were saying every 200 or 300 metres there was a carcass.
Yeah.
Two questions is that, was any of those carcasses stags with the antlers gone?
Yeah, a lot
so
of
the antlers
them.
were gone?
Yeah.
What are you getting to here? Someone's hunting?
Well, a lot of hunting. Yeah. These are not wildebeest on the Serengeti plain. I mean, they're a pretty cunning animal too, the old sambar.
Yeah, they are, to an extent. That's why spotlighting's illegal, because it supposedly makes it easier. But yeah, the amount of bodies in there was...
So what are we talking numbers-wise and what you saw?
I couldn't even put a number on it. About, from the camp, I reckon I walked 50 metres the first day I got there, and I found a beheaded stag, like a couple of days old.
And a couple of days old?
Yeah. If they were spotlighting, they'd be doing it late at night. And with today's technology, with infrared out, you won't even see a light, you'll just hear a gunshot. Yeah, it's not a uncommon thing.
So does that open it up then to consider hunters, and even a stray bullet's taken one or both out, and now they're panicked and have to cover up?
It's an extraordinary cover-up.
Yeah.
Would you panic to that degree? And
if you just shot someone, you might.
And there are people that get into the bush, into this sort of country, that they get a feeling of freedom to do whatever they want. So there's, the crazies get up there and they're shooting guns around. It does happen. It absolutely happens.
Well, certainly the disappearance of Russell and Carol has raised the fears of campers who have been in the same area. Russell's friend Rob Ashland tells this story about a mate who was in the area with a group to deer hunt.
They'd finished for the day and were sitting around the campfire having a couple of beers, and one of them looked up, and here in the edge of the light, staring at him, was this person. And so one of them shot over to his vehicle, and this person that was standing there just wandered behind the shadow of a tree and was gone. And it frightened the living billy-o out of these blokes, and they haven't been back. So they were being stalked without knowing about it for probably some time.
So there is potentially someone in those mountains, in that high country, who might be a suspect?
That's what is driving me, Liz, because these people have just vanished. Where are they? We want answers as to where they are.
Coming up.
There's a lot of dogs up there, a lot of dogs.
If they did corner you, I wouldn't like the chances if you couldn't get up. Police said the sleeping bags were missing.
That country is very rugged. There's a lot of places where they could be got rid of, never to be found again.
That's next on Under Investigation. When lovers Russell Hill and Carol Clay disappeared from their campsite in the high country of Victoria last year, so too did a number of their possessions, their mobile phones, a set of car keys, and Russell's drone. But chillingly, their sleeping bags were also missing.
You have tried to hide away your sins.
There's one thing that you said, Greg, that sort of makes me wonder. The police said the sleeping bags were missing, even if their tent burnt. There was no, residue of the sleeping bags or anything.
That's a bit unusual. Crime scene work for as long as I've been around, nearly 40 years, still talks about trace evidence being left. You're normally going to get left with something. I would still expect to find zippers. That comes down to a good crime scene examination. So even if the fabric and the insulating material has been destroyed by fire, I will still find the remnants of zippers and other things associated within that spot.
Whatever has happened to Russell and Carol, police and our experts now believe they've fallen victim to foul play. Russell's mate Rob Ashland agrees and fears Carol and Russell may have been attacked and removed from the campsite inside their sleeping bags.
In the event of an attack of any kind, how would he have protected himself?
Well, he would have tried to protect himself and obviously protect Carol, but if, for instance, they were asleep, you're behind the 8 ball before you start. And the fact that it's been reported that their sleeping bags are missing, that's what more so that makes me feel that they've been carted out of there in those sleeping bags, used as body bags. There's a lot of places. That country is very rugged where they could be got rid of, never to be found again.
Victorian police tell us they're planning to resume the search for Russell and Carol as soon as the weather and conditions allow. But what will they find, if anything, is unclear. There's one aspect of the high country that may be working against police forensic investigators: the high country's large and growing population of wild dogs.
If I was out in that environment with wild dogs around, if I was lost and cold and potentially injured, I'd be very concerned about what the wild dogs could do.
Mick Ott is paid to eradicate wild dogs in the Victorian high country. He says they're dangerous and will completely devour their prey.
They form in packs that are fairly large. They get up to a dozen I've seen in one pack of dogs. They're quite intelligent to how they hunt. I've found deer standing in the middle of a dam with a pack of dogs around the outside of the dam, attempting to swim out to the deer to pull it down in the water.
So, Lachlan, do you see these wild dogs out there?
See them, not so much. Only because they're so cunning and street smart, but that doesn't mean they're not there.
I'd just like you to hear something that Mick recorded.
There's a lot of dogs up there, a lot of dogs.
Yeah, but are they a threat? Would they be a threat to humans?
I guess it depends if they're hungry enough. Yeah, sure, they could probably have a go. You know, if they did corner you, I wouldn't like the chances if you couldn't get up.
This far corner of Victoria already held its dark secrets.
Well, it certainly is one of the biggest mysteries of recent times in that area, and the complexity has been added to because of this relationship.
But tonight, this is what we do know. Late in the afternoon of Friday, March 19th last year, Russell made his final radio call to his mate Rob Ashland. A worker spraying blackberry says he saw the couple, and a drone he believed was Russell's flew over his camp. Much of the campsite was destroyed by a suspicious fire, and in the ashes were unusual items: a drum, seats, and gas bottle. The couple's mobile phones and Russell's drone were missing. It's possible the drone captured images someone didn't like. There was evidence of illegal deer hunting near the couple's campsite. Russell's car was locked, but inside the vehicle, contents of the couple's wallets were scattered on the floor. Along with the drone and mobile phones, a set of car keys were missing, as were the couple's sleeping bags. And if Russell and Carol were murdered and disposed of in nearby bushland, wild dogs in the area might ensure their bodies will never be found.
Do we think that Carol and Russell are lost forever?
Forever's a long time.
My point is, are Russell and Carol dead?
On probabilities and what we're looking at here, so it's more likely than not.
I'd agree with that. They're not going to walk out and talk to us.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. People go in here to sort of get lost, I suppose, but maybe they got lost than they thought.
Thank you all for your time, and we've enjoyed your company. I'm Liz Hayes. Good night.
Next week, young, beautiful, and gone forever. The disappearance of Janine Vaughan.
One of Australia's most haunting mysteries.
This is the last time we see her alive. For the first time ever, her full final night caught on camera. Super cop Gary Jubilee.
It would be a place where you could dispose of a body.
And a new team of experts scrutinise every detail.
You see a little light above the time.
And uncover new evidence. 20 years later, it's time for the truth to come out. Join me for Under Investigation next Monday.